am Carolyn Potter, Council PTA President for last year and this coming school year, and honored to serve with an amazing group of ladies and gentlemen on our board. So I'd like to thank Marnie for gathering the over 10,000 words and 18 pages of questions submitted by our viewers. And I'd like to thank Deputy Superintendent Tabitha Branum for giving us her time. And I will let Tabitha speak. Her first section is on the overall general questions that address a very high global view. Tabitha. Marnie, you want to unmute Tabitha?
Maybe.
There we go. You are.
I have to find her. Oh, maybe if I unspotlight you. Now, can you do it? Oops.
There we go. I think we're good. Can everyone hear me? Awesome. Well, thank you, Carolyn. Thank you, Marnie. Thank you, Meredith. Thank the entire PTA for inviting me to be here this evening and connect with our amazing PTA. I know there are so many questions, and as I was scrolling through, I saw so many names of just amazing partners, and I celebrate you for giving some time on your Thursday night. I see many staff members on the call as well. So hi, I hope you all are having an amazing summer. We are technically still on our mass break. I have one more day. The district typically closes the last week of June and the first week of July. You may have heard Dr. Stone mention that in her video. This is really the only time as a district that we close down and have a little bit of time for the summer. But as you can imagine, we really have been working the past 2 weeks trying to make sure that we are ready for August 19th. I think that the first thing I would want to start off with is I want to make sure that I set your expectations for this evening, because I'm going to do my very best to answer as many questions as I can with the information that we have right now. But as you can imagine, that information is changing almost daily. Even last Tuesday, we had a call with the commissioner in which he shared with the entire state and the leadership of the state that one model that you heard us talk about a lot, the hybrid model, which was kind of an A/B day. That was the model that really was no longer on the table, and he replaced it with 2 other models. And so I think that's just an indication of how fluid and dynamic and ever-changing this is. Today, the governor released new regulations regarding wearing face masks. Well, TA still has not given us any guidance, any formal guidance on what back-to-school health and safety guidelines will look like. So we still really have a whole lot of unanswered questions. But I do want to try to at least provide some context for what we do know and what, within those things that we do know, what that will look like when we come back on August 19th. What I can commit, and Dr. Stone is so sorry she could not be here. She desperately wanted to be here, but she and I both have committed to doing a series of town halls with the PTA, both on this topic and other topics that we know are really relevant to what is happening in the district and the state and the nation on, you know, lots of different topics. So stay tuned, because more information will be coming soon. So to address what does back to school look like, Marnie or Carolyn, are y'all going to ask me questions, or do you just want me to go through the questions that you sent me?
You can, do you want to do it by topic? So the first set of questions was along lines of inventory and choosing options.
Yes.
So if you want to go through that section and then
Sure.
move on to the next one.
Sure. So there were a few general questions that were asked that I think really would be beneficial for everyone to hear. The first question was that you recognize that there's a lot of moving pieces, but can you give us some specifics on what school will look like, whether it's in person or virtual? And I think I just, you know, kind of shared with you some highlights in terms of that, you know, we're still finalizing that blueprint. We are committed to having the blueprint ready, both for staff to review first and to give us feedback, but then to share with our community And there will also be an opportunity for PTA and other community and business stakeholders to give us feedback before we publish that. We are waiting on key information from the state, as I just mentioned, including our health and safety guidelines. What I can share with you, and especially in light of the fact that we know our coronavirus positive cases are continuing to increase, especially in our local context, that the safety of our staff and students is the absolute priority. So we are constantly listening to our healthcare professionals, the CDC, to better understand the virus, how it spread, how we can contain that, and understanding how one decision can impact something else. So for example, if we were to implement one-way hallways, then how do we address making sure that there is not congestion in a specific hallway as kids are trying to get from point A to point B, and what does that mean for class periods? So definitely really thinking about how do we ensure the safety of each and every one of our students and staff. We've done a lot of proactive things to be ready. So for example, we've already started installing plexiglass shields in all of our major locations where our staff would interact with the community, whether we have a visitor in the front office. We are investing in plexiglass shields and some barriers that we could use, and they would be movable in our classrooms. We have already installed water bottle filling stations in every one of our campuses. Some of our campuses still had regular water fountains, and we know that that would not be safe for our students to use any kind of shared water fountain. So ensuring that there are water bottle fillers. Hand sanitizer dispensers are being placed outside of every single one of our classrooms, outside of every one of our bathrooms, outside of the, any kind of shared space, the library, the playground areas, all of those areas will have easy to access hand sanitizing. Lots of visual posters and reminders to our students. We know that they are very visual, and you can't just remind them once. We're going to have to remind them over and over again regarding hand washing and social distancing. What does it mean to ensure that they are protecting themselves and others, and having those posters and those visuals represented all around the school. So those are just a few of the proactive steps that we are taking. While those things, we don't know if they're going to be required in the TEA plan or in the CDC recommendation. Those are just good, prudent things that we know we need to be doing as a district, so that we're not caught on our heels. We've done a lot of research around face shields and face masks, and what does that protection look like? Again, today we have a governor's order that we should all be wearing face masks, and in public places, etc. So what does that look like? And what does that look like for our littlest of learners? I have a 6-year-old that will be entering pre-K entering kindergarten for the first time. And what is that best methodology? We have students that are hearing impaired. And if a staff member is wearing a mask that covers their mouth, they may not be able to lip read. And so investigating different face shields and those types of things, and pre-ordering those, because we know everyone has those in high demand. So those are just some of the things that I wanted to share with you all of what we're doing that you can kind of expect to see across all of our campuses and all of our central offices.
Thank you, Tabitha. Sorry.
Oh, no. I was just in the general questions, because I think this will also lead to that first section too, Carolyn. One of the general questions was, can you talk us through what kind of a day would look like for the synchronous online virtual model? Yes, absolutely, I would love to do that. Really, there are 2 models now that the state has told districts that you are allowed to implement with your students and still receive what we call ADA, average daily attendance, or our funding. And for our littlest of friends, our pre-K through 2 friends, it's either face-to-face, which means in-person instruction at the campus, or it's an asynchronous model. For our 3rd through 12th grade, it is a virtual model that is synchronous. Now, the asynchronous could be pre-K through 12, but as a district, we are really looking at the synchronous virtual for 3rd through 12th, and then the face-to-face. So what would a face-to-face virtual model look like? If I'm in elementary and I choose the synchronous elementary model, then I'm still going to have a homeroom teacher who is going to be my main go-to person throughout the day. There will be required times for me to log in and receive some instruction, some direction from our teachers. So don't think about this in the same way that our at-home learning looked like in the spring. This is a very different feel and a very different structure to it. It will all be facilitated by an RISD teacher that is certified, either for that grade level or that subject level. It may not be a teacher at your current campus. So even though I enroll, let's say I have a 3rd grader and my student is enrolled at, I'm just going to choose Big Springs Elementary. That's my home campus. I'm going to remain a student at Big Springs Elementary, but my teacher may not necessarily be a teacher from Big Springs, because we are recruiting and going to be training and using teachers that really want to teach in this virtual model. It's not for everyone. Not every teacher wants to leverage that model. It's also going to be a way for some of our teachers who have may have a compromised immune system, or may be concerned about a family member. They may see that the virtual model is the safest option for them as well. And so they would have the opportunity to teach in that model and be highly trained, receive professional development. The curriculum is the same, but the resources are differentiated for that virtual environment. So again, I will still be a Big Springs student, but my teacher will be a teacher through the virtual school. Through that, on any given day that I will be meeting with my teacher online. Now, we do not expect a student to log on at 7:30 and be online from 7:30 till the end of the day at 2:50. We recognize that that is not developmentally appropriate or necessarily healthy for all of our students. That they are going to need time to have processing time, to have practice, independent practice time. And so all of that will be built into the structure of the day. Students will have independent research, and they will have a time to complete tasks independently with the help of a family member. But it will be more structured than what you saw or what you may have experienced in at-home learning. If I'm a secondary student, I'm going to have a schedule of the day similar to, I have my periods of the day. Here are my 7 classes that I'm taking. And again, I'm going to have an opportunity to connect with every single one of my teachers every day and receive directions, receive instructions, have new material that is delivered to me. And then they're going to give me my independent practice similar to what I would have in an individual day. We are very excited that there are a lot of districts who have shared that in that model, they're not going to be able to differentiate and always offer AP or pre-AP. We are still planning on offering those options to our students so that you are not limited if you choose that virtual option, that you are not limited in your pre-AP and AP options. Same thing with electives. We really want to offer a robust selection of electives for our students, whether that be through foreign language, or that be through a CTE elective. It is important to note we may not be able to offer every single course. So for example, there may be some specific CTE courses. It might be a manufacturing course that we may not be able to replicate in a virtual environment. All of that information will be shared in the blueprint. So again, as a parent, before you make that final commitment, you will be able to know, what am I choosing? So if I choose the virtual option, this elective that my student really wanted to take may not be offered, and at least I know I'm making that educated decision on what I might be giving up. So just, I hope that gives you a little bit of an understanding of what the synchronous model will look like. It will be structured. There will be specific times that you will be asked to connect online where you will be given direct instruction. But there will be lots of opportunity for you to independently practice, to research, to be creative. Our students who are served through Gifted and Talented will have reach services, as well as Gifted and Talented services differentiated. Our students who may be served through a 504 plan or an IEP Our special student services team is working around the clock to make sure that we are providing those IEP accommodations as well. So we don't want any student to feel, or any family to feel, like that is not a viable option for you if that is ultimately what you feel like is safest for your family. So I think that gives you at least a general overview of what the synchronous virtual model will look like.
Thank you, Tabitha. The next set of questions was on the inventory and choosing options, and generally along the lines of when will we know the results? When's the last official day to decide which model we go with? You already answered the homeroom assignment classroom. Will people be able to switch between the two?
Yeah.
And along those lines.
Awesome, thank you. So yeah, we will share the results of the inventory. That closes on July 10th. And so we will turn that around. I'm not sure how quickly, but as soon as we can, we will share that. Again, the inventory is not a final commitment. I know you may be hearing that districts like Fort Worth and I believe Frisco, they have already published and are already asking their parents to make a full commitment for fall. We recognize that we've not shared enough information with our families to make that a final commitment. The inventory, the purpose of the inventory is for us to begin to understand where is our community falling in terms of how many are wanting to return to face-to-face and how many are thinking about the virtual option. Because as I mentioned, our virtual option will be facilitated by our teachers, RISD teachers that are certified and that receive specialized training. So if we have 10% of our families choosing that option, that's one set of teachers that we need to have trained. If we have 30%, then we need to think about staffing that very differently. Also, if we see trends at certain campuses, so for example, if we see one campus that has 30 to 40% of those students that are choosing one option and another campus has less, that allows us to know how to balance that in terms of staffing. So this is really an inventory to help guide us in our staffing models and give us a sense of how the community is feeling. It is not a commitment. We are not asking you at this time to commit to one model or the other. Once we submit the blueprint, and that is something that is available for all of you to read, that is very detailed, that really addresses all 18 pages and over 200 questions that you all asked. Once that is published, then the district will then ask you, as we get closer to August, to make a final decision. Now, is your commitment or is your decision, is that binding? First of all, it is not binding for the entire year. It's not binding for a semester. TA has given us flexibility as a local district to determine how long would we make that commitment. So for example, it might be that we ask you, if you're going to move to a virtual model, that we may say it's going to be by 9 weeks, which is our grading period. At the end of the first 9 weeks, if you chose the virtual model, then and you wanted to move to face-to-face because our numbers are, we've hit our peak and we start to see our numbers on a downward trend and you feel more safe coming, or maybe after the first 9 weeks, the virtual model did not meet the needs of your family and you want something different, or vice versa. Then at the second 9 weeks, you could switch to the other model. We might even do that intermittently. It might be at the halfway of the 9 weeks grading period. So that is, again, that information from TA just came out last week. And so we are making that final decision on how often can you move or potentially switch back and forth between the two models. We know it's not going to be good for our students or our staff where daily I could switch back and forth. So there will be some type of time requirement, whether that's 3 weeks or 6 weeks or 9 weeks. But there will be an opportunity to make a decision between each model. Absolutely, that will be an option.
Thank you. The next section is over a page long, and it's on staff and student protection, and includes questions along the lines of the requirements of masks, eating in classrooms for lunch, safety protocols, which you generally went over, social distancing on buses, temperature checks, And does one campus outbreak facilitate an entire closure of the district, just that campus? It's things along those lines. So I'll let you take it over from there.
And this is probably the section that you all will probably leave most frustrated by, because I'm not going to be able to talk in any kind of certainty, because we are waiting for final recommendations from TEA, as well as, you know, still understanding what the CDC is going to ask of us, and things for us to consider. But I can tell you that we are building in systems, for example, for a weekly health screening, where parents would have to let us know, did they travel over the weekend? Were there any new symptoms that your child displayed that we need to be aware of? We are making plans that if we decide to do daily temperature checks, we would have the capacity to be able to do daily temperature checks. As I mentioned, face shields and masks, we do not have a definitive decision on that. You know, based upon what happened today, I can see us leaning in a direction. And so we wanted to be very proactive. We have already ordered thousands of face shields, both for our staff and for our students, so that we would have those, as well as face masks. TEA is also providing us with additional PPE so that we have that. We don't expect every parent to provide that. We know that for many of our parents, that would be a hardship. And so that is something as a district we're committed to doing. We are looking at ways to stagger arrival times, so that we don't have, at some of our larger campuses, we don't have 1,000 students trying to enter the building at one time. And that is where our principals, for example, our elementary principals, it might be that our pre-K through 2 learners, they are coming in earlier, and then we stagger in every 15 minutes the upper grade levels, so that we don't have them congregating in the gym or, you know, in the cafeterias as they're waiting for their homeroom teacher to come pick them up. A question was asked around, do we as a district or does a campus, are we planning on doing testing? No, that is not something that I can tell you is currently in our plan, to become a testing center to provide that testing. I can tell you that we are working with each building to identify a place where if a student comes down and presents with a fever, or any of the symptoms, that there would be a safe place for them to go that would be isolated. So that is something that each of our nurses is working on. Our health team is working on to be ready for August 19th. One of the opportunities that we have had with our strength and conditioning program, as well as Monday, we launch Explore, which is our summer kind of daycare program for both employees and the community. We are having our opportunity to understand what systems do we put in place for contact tracing. So if a staff member either it was identifies that they were around someone who tested positive, or they have symptoms, or they tested positive, we have really developed our system around how do we trace that, and what are our protocols for communication. You may have seen, if you are in the RHS feeder pattern and we're attending strength and conditioning, we actually sent home a letter yesterday regarding a staff member who was around an individual that tested positive. So all of those protocols will be clearly outlined and delineated in the blueprint. In terms of what triggers a closure, all of that will be spelled out in the blueprint in regards to how isolated a specific class was. So if we have someone who tested positive, and if we've implemented all of our safety protocols, like minimizing, transitions around the building, specials coming to a homeroom versus the homeroom going to each of the specials. We don't have 3 or 4 grade, for example, you don't have all first grade classes on the playground at the same time using the equipment at the same time, and those classes are mixing with one another. As much isolation as we can, while still allowing for, because our school is social. So we want to make sure that we're still giving kids an opportunity to learn together, but in a safe way. So as much as we can do that, that is our intent. So if we do have a situation where we have a student or staff member that tested positive in a class, it may be that just that class is impacted, and not the entire school, or it may be that it's just that school. But if that student had older brothers or siblings, it may impact other schools and it may cause closure in those other schools. We will be prepared if we do have to close a classroom or a school, that we will shift to a synchronous virtual model in that time of closure. So again, we will be prepared and we will have the materials prepared that if for any reason we do have to close a classroom, a campus, or multiple campuses for X amount of days, that we can then shift to a synchronous virtual model for those students so that they are not missing learning while we are in that time of closure.
That was a great segue to the next section of questions. So the next section was, what if a student or teacher is ill or exposed? And I feel like you dove pretty deep into there. And those general questions are around notifications and numbers and triggers. And unless you want to address that more, I feel like you dove into that pretty good. The next section is teachers and staffing, backup plans. Again, this is along those lines. How you deal with shortages, and as far as teachers and their sick leave, paid sick leave, things along those lines, the very HR side of this.
Thank you. Yes. So I will tell you, the sub shortage is something that keeps me up at night before COVID, during COVID, and I am sure after COVID, because the challenge is real. Ensuring that we have high quality subs that can walk into any of our classrooms. And I see many of you in here. Thank you, Meredith. Many of you sub for us, and I thank you from the bottom of our heart for giving of yourself to serve in that way. We know that is going to be a real challenge. We know that when we have a staff member who is positive, and we do have to, have a sub that is ready to go, we are heavily going to be working on and recruiting our subs. We have done some more creative things recently to recruit more subs into the system, as well as we've done some incentives for compensation. So for example, subs that work 90% of the available days, or the available jobs that are offered to them, there's additional monetary compensation. We also do it down to, if they chose, up to 70%. So definitely something that we are doing to try to encourage subs to be there. They will all be brought in for a day of professional learning before we launch the school year. It may be through Zoom, but they will have a day of professional learning to make sure that they understand the safety protocols, both to keep themselves safe, as well as that they are implementing that for their students, so that when they walk into a building, it is not like, okay, what are we supposed to do? And what are these temperature checks? And that they understand the shift that we're having to make, that it doesn't look like school has always looked, and they feel prepared for that. We are working through, there has been a lot of federal legislation as well as state legislation around the CARES Act and protections for our staff members regarding their leave, and if they test positive, or maybe if I'm someone that has an underlying health condition and I don't feel comfortable coming back. Again, we hope that they will be a perfect candidate for a virtual or asynchronous option. But if not, we in our blueprint, we will fully outline all of the protections and provisions for our staff that are available to them, and that they are, and how they are protected by the Federal CARES Act and those other things. So all of that absolutely will be provided. If there is our central staff, I think this just speaks to it. We've had to do this in the past, and we expect that we may have to do it this year. If we experience a sub shortage, our central staff knows that they may be called upon to also go in, and they might be teaching third grade for 2 weeks. Or teaching high school English as well, because we, again, our number one priority is the health and safety of our staff and students. The second priority is ensuring that there is a strong, rigorous academic environment for our kids. And if that means for 2 weeks I'm in the classroom because that's where I'm needed and I can do I can support the most, and that's what I'm going to be, and I know our entire central team will be willing to do. So those are just some of the things that we're doing around that HR component.
Thank you. That leads us to the next topic, was switching between two models, which you discussed at depth. I don't know if you want to add anything to that, but it has to do with, you feel comfortable in one model, can you switch to the next model, and things along those lines. Do you feel like you've covered that?
Yeah, and the answer to that, again, I just want to reiterate, is absolutely yes. You will have the opportunity to switch between the models. The only decision point that we have now to make is at what interval. Is that going to be on a 2-week, a 3-week, a 6-week, or a 9-week basis? But absolutely, you will have that opportunity to move between the two models.
The next series was on the hybrid option, and in general is along the lines of, why isn't that an option and why was it taken off the table?
Sure. So on today's call, Commissioner Morales, so let me tell you why it was taken off the table. First of all, it was taken off the table when last Tuesday, and literally we had to make a change and a significant edit in the inventory as a result of that. But last Tuesday on our commissioner call was the first public TEA guidance that we had that was in writing around the instructional models, because up until then we had been given no guidance around how were we still going to be collecting ADA and what models would be allowed by TEA. And so last Tuesday is when Commissioner Morath shared the synchronous model and the asynchronous model. And it's important to note that TA even delineated that the synchronous virtual model was not applicable for pre-K through 2nd grade. So that's how detailed that TA was in terms of their models. And at that time, he was asked very point blank if the hybrid model was going to be allowed. And at that time, they had not made a decision, but they had not determined a way that a district, so in that hybrid model, let me remind you that it might be that, there's A cohorts and B cohorts, and it may be the A cohort comes in the morning and the B cohort comes in the afternoon, or on Monday, Wednesday, Tuesday, Thursday, that type of thing. TA was not sure, number one, that they felt like that was the best instructional or academic model. Number two, there were some health and safety concerns around what is happening when students are not in the environment where things like masks and other health and safety protocols were in place, that were you, in fact, potentially causing more risk in that model. And then third, there was some concerns around what, if teachers are teaching every day, then how are the students learning on the days that they're at home? And knowing that some of the challenges that we all experienced in the spring in at-home learning, and that there was not a formal way, there wouldn't be personnel where there was a formal way for when that student was at home. If I'm cohort B and I'm at home on Monday and Wednesday, there wasn't a formal way for a teacher to take attendance, to check on me, to turn in, give me instructions, for me to turn in my assignments and demonstrate that learning occurred that day. And so as a result of that, those were the concerns shared of why they took that option off. Now today, he alluded that there may be some options that districts have. So again, that just is evidence of how fast this is changing. Last Tuesday, it was not an option. Today, he's saying there may be an option, but he provided us no guidance other than saying there may be a way for districts to explore that. So that really truthfully is the main reason why we took that off the table, is we were not going to be allowed to move forward with that plan. If it is something that's allowed, of course, we will reconsider that, and that may be something that you see published in the blueprint and maybe an additional option for parents.
Thank you. A lot of good information. Thank you for some background on some of these selections and difficult choices that you all are dealing with. The next grouping of questions was along the lines of special student populations. And so those who are working in dyslexia and TA, the gifted services, speech therapy, and and how will that look, the 504s, the IEPs?
Well, I'm so proud of our district, and I'm so thankful for the leadership of Dr. Stone and our board of trustees, who really, even before, I would say early on in this process, we recognize that regardless of what the next 90 or 120 days were going to look like, and regardless at that time of even what TA was going to come out and share, we knew we were going to have some kind of virtual option for our families, that there were just going to be some families that no matter what, coming back to a face-to-face environment on August 19th was not going to be an option. And so we really started working on that synchronous virtual option very early on in the process. I would say really beginning in April, exploring what was that going to look like, what technology was going to be needed, because we did not want access to be an issue for our parents to choose that option. Internet should not be the barrier that keeps a family from choosing that option if that's what they wanted. And neither, we did not want a family who, that whether they are served through gifted and talented, or they are supported through a 504 or an individualized education plan, an IEP, to be limited in that in their choice. So if I'm receiving speech services or dyslexia services, that the only way to serve that would be through a face-to-face environment. And we know that that was probably one of our greatest challenges in at-home learning, was both how do we support reach services and how do we provide MTA or take flight while we were at home. So what I can tell you is that we are 100% committed that a student's IEP, 504 plan, their gifted and talented needs will be met, whether they choose a face-to-face environment or the asynchronous or synchronous. It may look different when school launches on August 19th, if you are primarily learning online through that synchronous or asynchronous model. And so there may be a need for a 504 meeting or a ARD meeting for you to meet with your online teacher, that virtual teacher, with a counselor, to understand your students' needs, to review your current accommodations and determine if any changes might be needed in the virtual environment, or to define this is how we are going to give those speech services, or this is how MTA will be delivered in this environment. But we do not want any parent to feel like they cannot choose that option because their child needs these additional supports and services. So those things are 100% a part of our plan and will absolutely be spelled out as a part of our blueprint.
Thank you. And the next grouping of questions is specifically about the in-person learning model on the staggered schedules, fewer students, how many are going to be in the classroom, and dives a little bit into PPEs, which you've talked about, clusters or cohorts, and the practicality of that, and do you foresee extending the school year along those lines? And libraries, what about materials and art classroom, things like that?
Yeah, those are all great questions. And I will tell you, I shared this with Marnie and Meredith and Carolyn at the opening of this, that I was so thankful to receive these because while, just when I think there's not a question you can ask, that I may not be able to tell you the answer right now because we haven't made a decision, but I'm able to say, yes, we've at least thought of that, or yes, we have that addressed. There were several on this list that I can tell you that was like, okay, we need to think about that. Or the way in which you asked it caused us to think about it differently. So if nothing else, and I hope that you leave tonight feeling like there were some answers and some direction given, even if not all of them were answered. And I hope that you do not leave more frustrated than when you entered this. That's been my biggest fear all along, because I can't answer every question with such certainty that I usually like to. But so I just want to kind of share with you the thinking that we're experiencing right now. So our principals have been hard at work, especially at the secondary level, thinking about how do we minimize those transitions. It's much more difficult at the secondary level You know, to have a group of students stay in a classroom and have all teachers come to them is much more complex, because as a student, I have so many more choices. I might be a ninth grader that is taking AP Human Geography, but I'm in on-level Algebra 1, and I'm taking, you know, French 2 or French 3, and I'm taking a high-level, you know, CTE class. So to cohort and find 30 students or to find 20 students that have the exact same schedule and keep them in one classroom and have every teacher come to them really is not something that we've been able to figure out yet. But we haven't given up on that, but we haven't been able to figure that out yet. So so how are we trying to address that? So we're trying to address that through, okay, so if students are going to have to move in the building, how do we minimize the amount of students that are in the hallway at any given time? So for example, is it that we release at the junior high level, we release seventh graders, you know, at the beginning of the passing period, let them get settled in their next class. We release eighth graders a little bit later and have them get to class a little bit later. We know that that may extend passing periods, but it would reduce the amount of students that are in the hallway at any given time. So those, I think that's just an example of, you know, thinking about the cafeteria, knowing that it will not be, you know, the safest place to have, you know, 600 kids in the cafeteria at the same place. So how do we bring lunches to the classrooms? And how do we, again, keep that in a very safe place, whether that's using plexiglass to separate students while they're eating. I saw there was a question around lunch. Yes, we are still going to allow parents and families to bring their own lunch. And we're not going to limit that, but how do we do that in a way that is safe and ensures that those things stay, you know, with that student and sanitize with other students not touching it. You know, right now, all first graders put their lunch in a big bucket, and that's carried down to the cafeteria, and everyone's lunch box is in one. Well, we're going to have to think about that completely differently, and we're not going to be able to do that. Same thing with art supplies or music right now. Right now, students go down to the art room, and they may all be sharing the same set of watercolors. And there might be 8 hands that touch that same watercolor brush or watercolors in that day. And we are thinking about that supply kit and our responsibility for that supply kit very differently, so that every student owns their own set of watercolors and their own water brush, and they are taking that to them, or when the art teacher comes to their room, that they are using their own art supplies in their classroom. So those are the playground. Again, we're used to having 60 students on the playground at one time. And we know how important play is. We don't want to limit play. We don't want to limit recess. We know what that means for oxygen in the brain. And we've worked too hard to get 30 minutes built into the schedule for elementary students to minimize that. So we don't want to lose that. But how do we do that in the safest way? So again, how do we, each classroom has their own set of PE, equipment, or, recess like equipment where they can take the soccer ball out. We only have one class at a time going out to the playground. And how do we then disinfect that in between each use? So those are all the level of detail that we're going into in terms of how do we structure that, in a way that is safe. Our hunch is that we will see some lower class sizes. Because we do believe that there will be a significant, regardless, I don't know whether that's 10%, 20%, or 30% of our families choosing the virtual option. Even if that's 10%, well, that's, almost 4,000 less students walking the halls of our buildings every day. So we do think that will have an impact on class sizes, which we think will help with social distancing. We are not anticipating, based upon what the commissioner has said up to this point, that there will be space restrictions or a limit in the number of students per class. But we are definitely going to be doing everything we can to implement those safety measures in the classrooms. And we hope that the lower class sizes will help facilitate that.
Thank you for that. Sorry, I'm on the move a little bit.
No, you're awesome.
The at-home learning questions were along the lines of verifying. Here you can. I hope I didn't make anyone sick with that one. Synchronous learning lessons, will there be more teachers hired, which you alluded to that we were using our RISD teachers. Along the lines of the digital technology behind that, will there be more students in the classroom or less? And diving into that, which you've covered a lot, but I don't know if you want to say anything else about that. Like how many teachers will you have per session, I guess.
Sure. Yeah, so we, again, the number of families that commit to that model will inform how many teachers that we need to successfully teach the number of students who, and that's why even this inventory and having an understanding of if it's 10% or 30% of our families that are choosing that option is going to help us begin to prepare and recruit the staff that might be needed to teach in that virtual environment. So we are working at that as we speak. I see some questions in here around like socialization. So if I choose that option, my student is learning at home either through the asynchronous or the synchronous option, will there still be opportunities for our students to come together, whether it's remotely through a Zoom and socialize? And the answer to that is yes. We definitely want students to have the option to come together and virtually. It might be that there is virtual PE lessons or experiences or a virtual recess. There's some amazing things that you can do with yoga and breathing techniques and all of those. Team building, we want, even in a virtual, if I share a homeroom with a group of 20 other third graders, well, we want to create a sense of community. So team building, social emotional learning, well, all of that will be a part of that experience. And it is, we want that same kind of relationship that is developed in a face-to-face environment. We want to foster that, and we know it'll look differently, but we want to foster that in the virtual environment. So absolutely those things will still be included. Parent conferences, there was a question around parent conferences. Absolutely. That parent communication will be absolutely critical in that model. Parents giving us feedback on what's working, what's not, us being able to share the growth of our students. All of our students next year will be taking the measure of academic progress, the MAP assessment, in grades kindergarten through 10th grade. And that assessment, while that assessment is so important, is because it does measure individual student growth. If a student is in 3rd grade and they are academically performing at a 4th grade level, well, it is our way to show you that we are growing them. If a student is in 3rd grade and came to us at a 2nd grade level for whatever reasons, then it allows us to demonstrate their growth, and are they making at least a year's worth of academic growth. And if our students are in the virtual school, whether asynchronous or synchronous, that same assessment will be administered, because our parents need to know if they're growing in this environment, and we will be able to demonstrate that through an instrument like MAP. So yes, lots of parent check-ins, lots of student check-ins, both on how are they doing academically, but also how are they doing socially and emotionally. Some questions were in there regarding, will I still have a connection to my home campus? So I'll use Big Springs again as my example. While my instruction may be delivered by a teacher who is not directly on the Big Springs campus, I am still a student at Big Springs. So I'm still going to be receiving the communication from the principal at Big Springs, campus events. I'm still going to be aware of those. We have been given guidance from TEA, and we're very excited about this, that for all academic competitions, students can still participate in any kind of academic competition or environment. We're waiting for guidance from UIL in terms of extracurricular. We don't know if you choose that option, whether or not football or band or cheerleading or any of those, track or, country western dance. I don't want to leave anyone out, so I'm not trying to leave anyone out, but you get my my message. We don't know if UIL is going to allow that if you choose the virtual option. We're hopeful that they will. And so that will be something that we will share with you as soon as we get that clarification from UIL. But we want to do everything we can to continue to foster that relationship that you have with that home campus, because we recognize the importance of community, and we don't want you to lose your sense of community. If you choose the virtual option, there was a question of, do you lose your spot? So for example, let's say I choose the virtual option the entire year for 2021, then for 21-22, does my child lose the face-to-face spot? And the answer to that is no. They are still an enrolled student at that home campus. The only exception to that is if you actually withdraw your student from RISD. So there were a couple of questions in here. If I choose a charter option, or if I choose to enroll my student in a private school, is my spot held? And if you withdraw from RISD and you re-enroll, it would be like any new student enrolling in the district, and it would be based upon that current space availability. But if you stay enrolled in RISD and you choose our virtual option, then absolutely your enrollment is still with your home campus, and the normal way that we enroll and assign classes will exist in 21-22. I think I got the majority of the another big question was STAR and accountability. And as of right now, that is, we have been told, and it is continued to be communicated to us, that we will be administering STAR. They have provided some flexibility in the window, but as of right now, we will be administering STAR, and we will be held accountable to the accountability, even though it will have to look very different, because a big part of accountability is student growth. How did they perform on STAR from one year next year to this past year? Well, they didn't take STAR last year, so we don't know how they're going to change accountability as a result of that. We do know that there is some pressure and some communication that has been placed on our governor and our legislators and on the commissioner around STAR, and so we don't know where that will end up, but as of right now, we still are taking STAR for 2021.
Thank you. That is the bulk of the questions. Do you have any closing thoughts?
Yeah,
I think there's another section.
There's a couple more sections, yeah.
They were all covered in other, it's the secondary specific AP, which she discussed the AP questions that yes, it will happen. And the back and forth, there's a lot of repeats, but if you'd like to address it.
I think people were also, I see a lot about magnets, about like,
right.
What do you, like specifically a lot of magnet questions, either for Berkner or Richardson.
Sure. So magnet courses, I think we will be, those will be dependent upon our ability to staff those and to be able to offer those courses, and if we feel like we can offer in a virtual equivalent to that. So you may have already read that there are some districts that have announced their blueprint and have said that, that they are limiting electives and limiting AP and pre-AP. We are doing our best to offer the breadth of courses that we can, but also want to communicate up front that we don't know that we can offer everything. So before you would have to make a decision on whether I stay at the RHS Magnet or, the Berkner STEM Academy or I choose a virtual, you will be able to see, here are the courses that we will be able to offer in the virtual, and here are the ones that we won't, so you can make an informed decision. We are not going to ask you to commit, and then you find out after the fact that, wait a minute, that the very reason that I go to school and that motivates me and, is the peanut butter to my jelly, is now the thing that I'm not going to be able to take if I choose the virtual option. So we will absolutely make that clear before you make that final decision. I wish, and I know if Dr. Stone was on here, she would want to communicate. We would want to offer everything that we can, because again, we don't want, we know safety is so important. At the same time, we also know that it is impractical for us to think that we can totally replicate. I don't know if you've seen a high school course catalog, but it's that thick. And to try to replicate that in a completely virtual environment, we know we're going to present some challenges. And so, but parents will be able to know that before making that final decision.
And Tabitha, when do you expect, because I think that's a big question people have, when will people be able, like when will all of that come out to do a drop decision day that people have to tell you? Like, are those dates kind of out or expected right now?
No, we haven't finalized those dates, because, you know, again, even last week, the hybrid model was kind of taken off, and the asynchronous and synchronous were kind of what was finally decided. So our intent is to release the blueprint. I believe that date is July 18th for the community. And we are going to be working around the clock the next 2 weeks to define the blueprint, to get teacher feedback on the blueprint, parent feedback. We have a panel of healthcare professionals that are experts in the field, that they will be reviewing our blueprint and giving us feedback. And so then we would share that blueprint. And then, for example, the final course catalog of what would be available in the virtual academy, we would hope to release that shortly after July 18th, so that we could, you know, shortly then after actually have our parents commit. We do not want to do that too soon. That's why we really, while most I shouldn't say most, several districts are asking parents to commit now. That's why we did the inventory. So, okay, let's get a gauge of how many parents, just based upon the information we have now, where are parents leaning? Because again, if only 10% are leaning, then that is that fewer teachers that we are recruiting to teach in the academy. And that means that there are even fewer courses that we can offer. If it is 30% of our families that are considering that, well, that's more teachers, and that's going to be able to allow us to offer a broader set of courses, if that makes sense. So all of that will impact then that final course list that we can then share. I would think that, you know, a rough timeline would be, you know, the end of July, the very beginning of August would be when we would send out a final commitment where we ask our parents to say, yes, I want this model, or the virtual or synchronous.
One last set of questions through the other was along the lines of, what is the online curriculum being taught through? Is it RISD curriculum? Are you using an online format, Zoom? What is that curriculum piece out of district, or is it an in-district piece?
Yeah. So the curriculum, regardless of the environment that you choose, the asynchronous, synchronous, or face-to-face, that is district curriculum. So we will be following the district scope and sequence. District assessments will be administered. So again, there is some certainty that you have that regardless of what platform you are choosing, that there's a certain level of educational experience you can have. Now, the online will have different resources than face-to-face, because, for example, it will be primarily done through, we will be using an online learning platform. And we currently use Schoology as a district for that. There will be curriculum resources that are procured just for that environment, that are all online, all digital, so that our students and teachers will have access to that anywhere, anytime. And then primarily their mode of instruction, again, as a district, we purchased some more robust Zoom licenses so that they would have the ability, for example, to filter and to kind of do what Marnie did today, where we only allow people that we recognize into our Zoom calls to ensure a safe environment. We also have a WebEx feature. So for our staff members that feel more confident using that platform, that would be available to them. But that's primarily, they would be learning and working within Schoology, using district curriculum, resources that were purchased specifically for an online environment, and then instruction, class meetings, team building, those types of things would be facilitated either through a WebEx platform or through Zoom.
Very exciting. It sounds like that's more like the summer school model that our students are experiencing right now.
Yes, ma'am.
Marnie, Meredith, any other questions? I feel like that's a lot of high level, but I don't want to leave anything on the table.
I know that I saw that we have a lot of teachers on here right now, as well as administrators. And so I know that a couple of the teacher concerns are, will some of them that are high risk be able to pivot to virtual learning, and when will they? Like, that was a few of the questions under teacher concerns is, who will be selected, or when will they be able to offer that, or find out if they can be part of the virtual learning.
And hi, teachers, we miss you, and thank you all for joining tonight. And the staff needs to know that, Dr. Stone and I, first of all, teachers are a part of and will continue to be a part of and give us feedback on the blueprint. So I want to make sure that they know that. And then there will also be several of these types of meetings that are set up where Dr. Stone and our team will be able to share with our teachers, here is what this back to school plan is going to look like as well. So I want to make sure that they know that. We, in terms of teachers having the opportunity that if they know if they have underlying health conditions, or maybe there's someone in their family that does, and they're just concerned about coming to the back to the face-to-face environment. That's why this inventory, and I know y'all are tired of me hearing, I'm like a redundant, broken record, but I'm going to keep saying why this inventory is so important and why we need everyone to take it before July 10th. But those numbers are really critical for us. Again, whether or not I'm staffing for 3,000 kids to be online, or if I'm staffing for 9,000, y'all, that is huge. The number of teachers that it's required to teach 9,000 kids is very different than 3,000. And the ability for us to offer, 60 teaching positions to virtual, and teachers being able to say, yes, that's what I want, and us being able to recruit them, train them, get them ready for August 19th in that virtual environment is huge. So whether it's 10 or it's 60 teachers, that's where this inventory is so important. But yes, teachers will absolutely have the opportunity to say, that is something I want. I believe that, number one, it's better for me in terms of my health and safety, but number two, like, I'm excited to teach in that environment, and I want to learn that new technology, and I want to engage with my students in that environment. And also that they feel comfortable where, again, because parents and families can choose on those designated timelines, that they may be pivoting between, in the first 9 weeks, they may be teaching virtual, but in the second 9 weeks, they may be teaching back face-to-face, and that they feel comfortable pivoting in that way as well. So absolutely, our teachers will have an opportunity to say, I'm all in, and I want to be a part of that environment.
Do you have any idea how many have filled out the inventory right now?
Yes,
maybe we can go and encourage, if everybody, there's 150 people on here, if they can go encourage people to, in their PTA membership to fill out the inventory, but just to give us a rough idea of maybe what the numbers are looking like in terms of the return.
Yes, ma'am. As of Monday, we had almost 9,000 students. So, and remember, you turn in one per student. So I have 2 students currently enrolled in RISD, and so I submitted a survey for each one of them. And right now we have almost 9,000 individual students that have shared, that have turned in that inventory. So we still need about 31,000. So we would still, now again, there are a lot of, we have some amazing statisticians who are looking at that and helping us identify trends and can help inform, let us know that you don't need all 39,000 to get a good sense of, but every single one does matter and does count. And because it also allows us to see certain patterns by campus. So if we have, even if as a district, we can see X% appears to want to choose that option, we're really interested in also seeing it by campus level. Because that could also influence, for example, what teachers we can move from face-to-face to virtual. So every student submitting in that inventory is hugely important.
So our takeaways for this evening are lots of answers. We saw things we don't know, and go encourage people who know to go fill out the inventory. So Marnie, Meredith, any last moments?
I just
All right,
want
we're
to
coming up
share
at the end of our
that
time.
I just want to share that hopefully the video will be up tomorrow on a link to it will be on our Facebook page. So please watch for that. And like Tabitha mentioned, I sent every question any person sent, no matter if it was a repeat, if it was the same question 25 times, but everybody said it a little differently, and I wanted to make sure that they understood your version of the question. So know that even though she might not have addressed your question individually today, they have all of those questions so they can look through that and make those decisions.
So I wish you could see. Okay, wait, I don't know if you can see it. Okay,
It's
but
just
I
a
have,
white
The white
screen.
screen.
dang it, I have this Word doc. I wanted to show you because I have this Word document up, and I want, like, literally I have gone question by question and put notes there of either, again, if there's a nuance to a question or a, like, hey, we can't answer that. I've staged every single question so that I can be sure that if I couldn't address it tonight, or if you left going, okay, she didn't really answer, like, you answered it, but she didn't really answer that you have the assurance of Dr. Stone and myself and our entire leadership team that those answers are coming. And I promise you, I will be using your questions as my checklist. And there will not be one that is left off when we are finally ready to share a final blueprint.
Well, and that is a great reminder that you do have all the questions. And thank you for answering or attempting to answer all the questions that you can. We are approaching hour 15, which we said would be the end of our meeting. So any closing remarks? This is the end. This is your meeting, Tabitha. What would you like to leave with?
So first and foremost, I hope your takeaway is that safety of our staff and our kids and our community and our parents is paramount. It is the thing. Dr. Stone and I check in almost daily, and to end every day, the thing that is keeping us up at night is, are we doing everything we can to make sure that everyone feels safe? And then second, how do we make sure that every student continues to connect, learn, grow, and succeed, even during this uncertain time? And then I know your patience is waning a little bit, but I do hope that you will continue to be patient with us in the next 2 weeks as we finalize these plans. We could have published things sooner, like other districts have done, but we knew we wouldn't be doing our due diligence, and we knew we wouldn't be, until we have all the information that we need, we would just be causing more disruption. And so we really were committed to making sure that when we release our plan, that it is our best plan. Like this has been the best thinking, our best work has gone into that plan. And then if you have questions or things that are on your heart, things that you feel like maybe we are missing, I just implore you to either connect with us on Let's Talk or to send me an email. Carolyn, Meredith, Marnie, they all have my cell phone number. They can give you my 214-869-3884. You can text me. You can call 214-869-3884. You can text me. You can call me at any time. We know that this is a time of anxiousness. I feel it. I know you feel it. I have 2 kids that are going to be walking into our schools on August 19th as well. And I want for each of your kids the same thing I want for ours. And that is for them to have a school year that helps them grow and helps them socially and emotionally, that, that they find fun and joy, but they're challenged as well. And that is our commitment to each of you. So thank you for your patience. And I pray that you are leaving tonight not feeling more frustrated than you did coming in. And so if I've done that, then I have succeeded.
thank you for your time, and thank you for everyone who joined in. And no, it will be posted tomorrow. The next town hall is June 15th, and Dr.
July
Stone will
15th.
July 15th. Thank you, July 15th, and Dr. Stone will be on that call, and that is on diversity and equity. So we will do the same format. It's accepting questions on the front end, consolidating, and giving Dr. Stone some time to gather thoughts around that. So look forward to that link going out. Thank you, Tabitha, for your time this evening. Thank you, Marnie and Meredith, for helping host. And everyone, have a good evening. And remember, it's posted starting tomorrow. So thank you.